Hello and welcome to all of you who have joined us at this event, which celebrates the launch of the new book that myself and my fellow authors, Lee Peachey, Franco Polizz and Sophie Murfin are delighted to publish today, what John Catt have published today. And it's wonderful to have so many of you here joining us for this event, which is hosted by the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtues, based at the University of Birmingham. I'm the Director of Education at the Jubilee Centre for Character and Virtues, and a lot of the research, as well as the kind of the theory building that underpins this book, has very much been developed through the research that myself and others at the Jubilee Centre have undertaken, and I think therefore it's very fitting and the Jubilee Centre host this event today. It's great to see so many familiar names joining us today, and what I really hope is that we're not just here to celebrate the launch, which obviously myself, Sophie, Lee and Franco are extremely pleased and kind of quite giddy about publishing the book today, but what we really want to do is give you some insights from the publication that you will hopefully bring some kind of enlightenment and advice and support to yourselves as you think through the really kind of challenging situation that so many teachers, schools, parents and kind of others face when we think about how to best educate children and young people today to prepare them not only for the many digital risks and opportunities that they are facing at this very moment, and many of these we really know, but also these digital risks and opportunities that are likely to be coming down the line and in the future as well. And that's why we perhaps optimistically titled this book Futureproof, because we hope that within this book we start to think about what a comprehensive framework for what's commonly called digital citizenship education, but may also be referred to as digital character education, what a comprehensive framework to that might look like, and what we can do in schools right now and in other educational settings right now to provide children with the kind of the sorts of, or help them develop the qualities, the virtues, the values, and the skills and strengths that enable them to flourish not only today in their interactions, but also the sorts of qualities that they will no doubt necessarily need, whatever the future looks like and whatever the technologies changing in the future. So I'm going to give a very brief overview of this framework, and then I'm going to ask Lee, Franco and Sophie, who are going to just dip into the book and just give some key tips, insights from the sections that they were involved with writing. But we will make sure that we leave time for questions, so please do feel free to pose questions on the chat throughout, or indeed we'd very much welcome people who want to actually ask their question live to any of the authors here, and I'll chair those questions. So our aim is to leave a good 15 minutes at the end for you to ask those questions. So just briefly, why did we write this book? I, some of you will know, wrote a book last year for parents entitled Thrive, How to Cultivate Character so Your Children Flourish Online. But it was very clear to me that although parents, I'm a parent myself of two children who are living very much extensively these days in the digital world on their smartphones, laptops, it was clear that as a parent I've got a lot of responsibility in that area. But also it was very clear speaking to schools and teachers that there's a lot that can be done within those school environments. But this is clearly the responsibility of other constituencies as well, such as policymakers and ed tech as well, and perhaps watch this space if I can get the energy and motivation to write future books for those audiences as well. But this particular book is for primarily for teachers and schools in this area. What we all know is, as I've already said, there's a lot of risks and opportunities that present children and young people, but it feels like although there's a great deal of advice and brilliant charities, some policy support and documents about what schools might do to educate young people as kind of wise digital citizens, speaking to schools, there didn't seem to be much of a coherent framework for schools to think about how to bring all of this together and think about a bespoke approach that works for them. So what we've tried to do is provide some advice to fill that gap. One of the teachers described it to me as being like shooting in the dark while trying to hit a moving target, teaching digital citizenship education, because because they just felt that they were digital immigrants and didn't always understand the technologies that so many of their pupils were using, but B, because this technology was moving so quickly and the advice wasn't always out there, that they just felt that they just didn't have any sense of where to start. So if nothing else, we hope this book will provide a place for schools and teachers to think about where they might start. A few features of the book which are really important is that or important to us, and hopefully you agree with, is that we deal with digital risks and opportunities together. We think it's wrong to just focus on the many digital risks, things like crime, cyberbullying, abuse, etc., which are clearly very important and problematic, without also recognising how much many children and young people gain and can gain from technology. So we deal holistically with it, and we try not to be too deficit-based. We also try to look at the strengths and positives that these technologies can bring. We try to align with a lot of the great work that's already been done by organisations such as Common Sense Media or NSPCC or the UK Council for Internet Safety, etc. We bring those as references within this book, but show how they may, as I say, we provide the framework where these approaches may be pinned onto. And ultimately, we try to make this book very hands-on and practical. We clearly haven't given a full course or programme and how you might undertake a whole school approach to citizenship education, but we hope we've provided a very clear frame and then some examples, case studies from practice that you can hopefully be inspired by and build on. And Lee and Sophie will be talking from a primary and secondary perspective a bit later to give you some further insights into them. But it is also, although a very practical book, it is grounded in theory and draws on research and empirical evidence when it is present. It's very problematic, getting good, solid empirical evidence about what we should do in these situations, but where it is present, we have drawn on that. So just in the next 2 or 3 minutes, I wanted to just give you a very quick overview of what this framework is, and then I'm going to hand on, as I say, to other speakers to just give you some insights into it or how it might be practically articulated within classrooms and within schools. So the framework rests on having 3 components. And within each of these components, there's 2 objectives that we think schools should strive to meet. So the first component is about focusing on the idea of digital flourishing. What would it mean for children and young people to digitally flourish today and in the future, which we define as the ability to live well in a digital world worth living in. And in terms of the objectives, one of those would be to work with for schools and communities to work with their pupils, their parents and other people in the community to actually develop a vision for a shared vision for digital flourishing, which becomes the vision that all decisions about what to do around education in this space may be measured against, to see whether those approaches are contributing or maybe taking away from that overarching digital vision. And the second objective, which goes alongside that, would be to provide children and young people and indeed staff to have a very much shared digital literacy in this space. This is a common language and a set of functional and critical skills and knowledge that enables children to really decipher, think, know and understand their digital lives and the interactions that they have in it. What's important, this needs to be much more than just a functional digital literacy. It's not just about how to use technologies or how a technology works, albeit that may be important. And actually, most of our children are probably much better than us at a lot of that functional digital technologies. It's more about having a language to explore how digital technologies interact and affect them in their day-to-day lives. It's being able to ask questions, critical questions about both the positives and the negatives of digital technologies in young people's lives. So those are the two objectives related to the first component around digital flourishing. The second component is about creating a set of digital rules. And we know so many schools, indeed your school may be the same, who really wrestle with this question about what rules are appropriate. Should we be really permissive about the use of technologies in the classroom, or should we be really restrictive about it? How do we define what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate use of internet or content within those websites? But clearly schools need some rules around this. Schools operate and need rules to provide what I would call a minimum expectation on behaviour and standards within these settings. But these are difficult questions. Many schools do have a digital policy, and that's an objective that we would very much, our third objective, which is creating and updating those digital policies. But that digital policy needs to read into the digital vision. You know, how are those policies supporting that vision for the school? But also the fourth objective we focus on is what we call digital netiquette, which is actually children and young people's own set of guidelines about how they'd like to interact or how they think they should interact online. So these aren't necessarily character qualities, they're more about rules and guidelines and what they could or should or shouldn't do. Within the book, we provide different examples of what a netiquette approach netiquette and also digital policies might look like. But finally, the third component, and perhaps the most important component, is digital character. That is actually the character that is really the human qualities that pupils and staff need to develop if they are to use digital technologies in a ways that really maximises the digital opportunities and minimalises the risks that they face. And anyone who's, most of you I know, are very familiar with the Jubilee Centre work, and the focus on the building blocks of character, which is the virtues, of which we think the most important in this space is what we call digital wisdom within the book. So therefore, objective 5, and there's lots of examples in the book about how you might do this, is about cultivating the digital virtues such as honesty, compassion, integrity, resilience, that are not only necessarily now, but also necessary in the future. And objective 6 is around how digital wisdom might actually be cultivated as an overarching kind of meta virtue that helps all of us put the virtues into practice in daily situations and dilemmas that we actually face as well. So again, within the book, we provide examples of how that might go about. So that's a very quick overview of those 3 core components that are the basis of the framework that are focused throughout the book, and the 6 objectives that we provide advice on how teachers might meet. And I'm now going to hand over to Franco, who's going to explore a little bit more about the context around the digital risks and opportunities before we conclude with presentations from Lee and Sophie, who are going to show how this actually looks within the classroom. So over to you, Franco.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you everybody for being here today. It is such a pleasure to be talking about this book because, as Tom was saying, I think it is really timely, and it comes at a moment in which a lot of schools and educators are really struggling with digital citizenship education. Sometimes it's even unclear what that means in the first place and how to really promote this form of education. And the basic understanding that we all have is that it is essential in the digital age. At the same time, so many different things have been said about this form of education. It is quite difficult for educators to really get a sense of what to do. So in the framework that we kind of propose in the book, as Tom was saying, starts from the recognition that the internet and digital technologies in general provide both risks and opportunities. And it is very important, I'd like to reiterate that one more time, that we really take a balanced approach because in the literature, so much has been said about risks, sometimes creating moral panics and kind of dystopian accounts of the potential of these technologies. And some other scholars have perhaps focused a little bit too much on the opportunities that these technologies provide, overlooking the fact that these technologies also present a number of constraints and issues. So in the framework, we start from the recognition, and then what we did was to basically map the six objectives that Tom was just presenting earlier onto a number of risks and opportunities. I should say that we tried to be as comprehensive as possible in terms of thinking about the most important kind of risks and opportunities that these technologies provide young people and users in general. Though I should say that the risks and opportunities that we have in the book are not necessarily exhaustive, but we do think that these are that they cover quite a lot of the of the potentials and limitations that these technologies present. So I should say that in terms of digital risks, we focused on 5 key areas, starting from online abuse, which of course includes forms of online abuse such as trolling and cyberbullying, of course. Then another area has to do with crime. So issues like grooming and extremism, issues of identity theft and fraud. These are examples of how these technologies can be used to perpetrate crime. And then we also focus on privacy, which is a very important area, considering also that the last few years, think of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, have really, in the last few years, we've witnessed, we've really started to notice how problematic these technologies can be, and especially also in terms of how big corporations like Google and Facebook kind of operate and run their platforms, and what kind of privacy implications kind of exist in that area, which relate to issues of data tracking, for example, which is something we talk about in the book, but also the problem of digital footprint, right, which can be problematic for a lot of young people who are not necessarily aware of the consequences of what they post online. And then another area has to do with mistrust. And so mistrust, obviously, there is this big, trend that we've seen in the last few decades, actually, which is this sort of kind of growing mistrust in kind of institutions and in the media. But at the same time, what we've also witnessed in the last few years is a rise in terms of like misinformation and the extent to which, fake news and all of that, but also issues around kind of creating distorted, fabricated identities, which is something that that can be a problem for a lot of users and young people, and also issues of plagiarism, for example. And then the final fifth area in terms of digital risks has to do with well-being. And so we talk about issues relating to, for example, screen time or exposure to inappropriate content, and also issues, around kind of depression and self-harm. But as I was saying earlier, digital technologies don't just present, considerable risks. They also provide very important opportunities, which is precisely why we kind of take an approach that kind of sits between protectionism on the one hand. So we do realize that young people need to be equipped so that they can protect themselves from these risks. But at the same time, they need to be empowered and they need to be given opportunities to pursue all of those opportunities that come with these digital technologies. And in terms of opportunities, we've identified 5 key areas. And those 5 areas are learning. So think of obviously about, for example, the importance of using digital technologies for learning purposes. This is what we're seeing every day in school, because the use of digital technologies has become way more prominent than it used to be, and young people use those technologies also within their their household in order to search things, in order to do their homework and so on. Then another important area has to do with connection, right? So this idea of social connection, this idea of being able to make friends or being able to be in touch with friends or family. And the COVID-19 pandemic, I think, has really shown to all of us the importance of using digital technologies in order to sustain certain connections that we already have in our lives. Another important area has to do with leisure. So it has to do with basically expressing creativity. Think about, all the videos and all the different kind of media artifacts that kind of young people are able to produce today, and then to share within fora or when using, social media platforms. In this area also has to do with, of course, kind of accessing also kind of entertainment. Then another important area has to do with employment, because obviously digital technologies also provide young people with opportunities to kind of pursue opportunities related to their future careers, but also in terms of networking, which can be very beneficial for employment purposes. And then ultimately a very important area, which is a very important area considering that we're talking about digital citizenship education, is indeed citizenship. And by citizenship, we kind of take a very comprehensive approach to the term, in as much as it kind of has to do with both kind of democratic political participation, so participating in kind of formal political processes, but also civic participation, which traditionally can be understood as having to do with kind of community involvement, and so being part of, being a member of a community, and what that means in terms of using digital technologies today. So considering that we have the five big areas that have to do with digital risks and five areas that have to do with digital opportunities, what we do in the book and what we do through the framework is to then map these risks and opportunities to all those different objectives that Tom was mentioning earlier. I'm just going to give a couple of examples just to give you a sense of the kind of examples and the kind of things that we kind of argue in the book. So Tom was saying, for example, that a digital vision is essential, right? So schools and parents and everybody that works with young people kind of needs to make sure that young people kind of cultivate and develop a digital vision, because that has to do with their motivation to then use digital technologies in a specific way that can help them flourish in the digital age. And a digital vision is essential in relation to all of these risks and opportunities. But say, for example, when it comes to online abuse, it is important that young people appreciate start kind of developing sort of an imaginary of the internet and the world in the digital age, in which, for example, online abuse is eradicated, right? Or they have this sort of motivation to live in a world in which forms like cyberbullying, forms of online abuse like cyberbullying and trolling do not exist. Now, this can be quite utopian in a way, but it is also very important to have that vision in order to kind of have the motivation to use digital technologies in a particular way. And the same thing applies, also, for example, also to citizenship, right? Having a digital vision is essential in terms of kind of a vision that has to do with democratic participation, what that looks like in the digital age, right? A sort of democratic participation that is essential to societal flourishing. And flourishing, again, is both kind of individualistic in as much as it is about young people thriving in the digital age, but it also applies to society at large. Then digital literacy, for example, which is another important objective, like Tom was saying, has to do with functional and critical skills and knowledge about the internet, and it provides a language. Digital literacy is essential, for example, when it comes to privacy. It is essential that young people kind of develop an awareness of the privacy implications of using these technologies and how these big corporations kind of, handle users' data. And at the same time, it is also essential in terms of managing privacy activities, right? And then when it comes, for example, to rules, but Tom talked about kind of the importance of, so how important it is for schools to kind of come up with a set of agreed policies, but also kind of netiquette kind of guidelines that can help really young people kind of navigate those risks and opportunities. And we, when it comes to agreed policies, we suggest in the book that schools should come up with policies, for example, when it comes to well-being, that can really help young people in terms of kind of support young people in terms of their mental health, particularly in relation to using the internet, and ensuring, for example, that lessons around mental health in the internet are firmly embedded in the curriculum and as part of subjects such as PSHE, for example. At the same time, netiquette guidelines are also essential because, say, for example, when it comes to mistrust and misinformation, netiquette guidelines are essential because they would encourage young people to also be mindful of how to use these technologies, for example, by encouraging them to kind of think before sharing information. That sounds like a very trivial piece of advice, but sometimes that can really make a difference because young people are immersed into a world in which everything happens so quickly and so fast, and they hardly take the time to even read something properly before sharing it with other users, with their friends, with their family members, and so on. At the same time, when it comes to digital virtues, as Tom was saying, character, that's probably the most important element of this framework. and being able to possess a number of different virtues is essential. It's essential, for example, for young people in terms of navigating misinformation, again, because young people should, of course, understand that information should be accessed and then also produced and shared in line with principles of honesty and integrity, for example. And at the same time, we can also see how then ultimately wisdom, which is in itself a virtue, but it's a meta virtue, like Tom was saying, is another very important essential component of this framework. In as much as young people need to be able not only to basically possess and deploy different virtues, but they can only make the right decisions at the right time when using the internet, and they can only decide whether to deploy a specific virtue as opposed to another, depending on context. And that ability to really navigate different settings and make decisions that are informed by their context is what we pretty much refer to as digital wisdom. This is all for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Franco. And just briefly, a couple of points on that. One of them, that part of the purpose of the book is we wanted to, as you say, give areas that you could think about what are the risks and the opportunity together. So hopefully those definitions and those categorization of those will help, but also linked to that, we provided case studies of how these might look in different schools based on real life areas that you can see those in action. And also within the book, we provided tables with learning expectations around each of those. That is almost a chart that you could evaluate progress around each of them. But now to really get into what those look like in schools, those risks and opportunities, and learning and teaching approaches that you might take to address them, I'm going to hand over to Sophie, who is the executive head at the Wise Hours Trust in Manchester. I've worked with several years in this area and was an absolutely crucial co-author within the book to really show what might be done in this space. So over to you, Sophie.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I have got some slides. I thought you'd prefer to look at pictures of children than pictures of myself. So may I just start by saying I'm absolutely thrilled and honoured to have been part of the book. I know quite a lot of people on the call today, and those of you that do know me know that character is very much at the heart of everything that we do here at Wise Hour Trust. Really committed, and in fact, it's what gets me up in the morning and to come and do the job that I'm doing. And so tonight, hopefully, we'll be able to bring a couple of sections of the book alive for you. For those of you that don't know me, in my day job, I am the Executive Principal and CEO of the Wise Hour Trust, which is a really small multi-academy trust based within Manchester. And the reason why I mention that is because I'm very much on the ground. I very much understand the issues that we're dealing with on a daily basis, what's coming into the classroom and onto the playground. We started teaching character education explicitly about 7 years ago now, and we've really seen the positive impact that it's had on our young people, and that when we get it right, the impacts can not only be life-changing but lifelong. And our belief is that we really need to prepare our children for their future, preparing them for life beyond the school gates and their time beyond us. And that involves giving them the skills to act with moral intention when online, so that they can shape and deal with the challenges themselves. Pre-pandemic, we were already seeing the issues that stemmed from online activity coming into the playground. And we knew that the issues were already on the horizon. However, the pandemic for us indefinitely brought about change, especially within the primary sector. What we were witnessing was more and more issues coming into the classroom and onto the playground that you would most expect from secondary aged pupils. And I suppose what the pandemic did for us was that it really accelerated those issues that were already on the horizon. Obviously, what we know is that we gave every single child a device, with not necessarily giving them the knowledge of how to navigate the World Wide Web wisely. And for some of our children, it really was a whole new world. Obviously not for all, but for quite a lot of our children, they had freer access than they had previously. For example, they didn't have to share devices with siblings or parents, in fact. And these figures on the screen just show the sheer amount of children at that time that we took this, which is quite outdated now, the amount of children that had that access online, and the sheer young age of children that were accessing. At our trust, we were already working on a cyber character programme, and our workshops were very much developed not only with the teachers but also with the children, because what we noticed was that the children could constantly outwit us. The pace of change is just so fast that we couldn't keep up with the younger generation who are natives in their use of technology. And the intention for us has always been about supporting the young people themselves so that they've got the skills to navigate their own way and their own future. And we very much recognise that it's no good us doing it for them. And what we also recognise is that whether we like it or whether we loathe it, the internet is here to stay, and that it's our duty to get the children to have that ability to question so that they don't believe everything that they see and everything that they hear, and then they have that rational skepticism, but whilst also building on that onboard safeguarding mechanism, so being able to recognise danger and where to go for help. But for us, that's only part of it. Digital wisdom is also about the qualities and skills to ensure that our young children that they don't become victims or indeed perpetrators of online activity. And it's about building those character traits required for that intrinsic reward, but also that self-sanction, because when online, as we know, no one is giving out those rewards for good decision making, and actually it's a seemingly boundary-free world to our pupils. And for us, far too many times we've seen a child that's been stood in front of us whose online persona is so different to the one that we see in real life. And more, what we're seeing is that children aren't only taking on new personas, but multiple personas. And this isn't only impacting on their behaviour, but also their mental health, in terms of children not really fully knowing or owning themselves or understanding themselves. And we've written about that in the book, and about how this online preferred persona, most notably seen on platforms such as Instagram and TikTok, have exploded into the primary playground, and that like culture swaying the decision of some of our children. And here at Wise Owl, as I say, we've already developed a programme that's sequenced throughout the year groups. And one of the workshops in the book is a very practical activity. So the children play I have, or I have not, or I have never, however you want to word it. And in our school, they have paddles, so double-sided paddles, I have or I have not, or you could do it with whiteboards, or you could do it with different coloured cards. And before we begin, obviously, because we've got a whole programme, there's a lot of work that goes before this, but we set out ground rules around confidentiality, and then we ask the children questions. And because we put a lot of groundwork in, we ask quite sensitive questions. Obviously, it depends on the context of your school and the children that you're working with. But we ask questions such as, have you ever lied about your age to gain access to an online app? Or have you ever manipulated a photo? And I suppose that's over to the teacher to gauge what's really relevant for their class. But what that did for us was it sparked so many other discussions. So, for example, the like culture. So we noticed that some of the children were liking things just because they were, not liking things, saying the same as the most popular member in the classroom. So then that opened a whole new conversation around different things, and it really created quite a lot of debate and conversation. And I think the biggest eye-opening thing for us was that we didn't really recognize until we did this activity what our children were accessing. So this actually then, it was an eye-opener, and it then shaped our curriculum moving forwards, because what we thought our children were accessing was completely different to actually what they were accessing. And also, obviously, it's another life skill, being able to debate, listen to the views of others, tolerate the views of others, and I suppose navigating. We've also worked out that through these conversations that there's so many apps that have additional functions that we didn't know existed. For example, TikTok has the ability to chat. We didn't know until it was a little bit too late and we were dealing with an issue that presented itself from a child. And another activity is around sending messages between different classrooms or being blindfolded. And the idea of that is to kind of simulate the idea of online activity, because you're sending it to somebody and you've not got that those social cues. And how does the recipient read it? Do they receive it in a completely different manner to the way in which it was sent? Also, the use of emojis. Emojis are used a lot by our children. In fact, I'm also guilty of that. And yeah, just trying to replicate that online, I suppose, environment, and to try to stop that disconnect between online and real life behaviours. And again, we've found that sparks some really amazing discussion at all year groups. So right the way from Key Stage 1 all the way up to Key Stage 2. We've had some really reflective conversations. And a massive part of what we do is around that, giving the children the chance to reflect. So we talk a lot about giving the time and the resources to enable all children to have that opportunity to reflect, to understand their own areas, their own strengths for development, and what they need to focus on, with adults being on hand to be able to help and support them moving forwards. Again, understanding that especially when online, our children need to be able to self-regulate and take a moment for themselves, maybe a pause before responding. And as already has been mentioned, it's not all negative online. I think sometimes as teachers, we do sway towards the negative impact, especially when you're seeing it impact within our classrooms and our playgrounds. However, there is a massive advantage, and we use Ryan as an example to our children. In fact, I remember quite a few years ago, me asking the children what they wanted to be when they grow up. Often it was footballers, then it changed to YouTubers. At the time, I didn't actually know what a YouTuber was. Today, obviously, I do. But the harsh reality of it is that the vast majority of our children will go on to have online jobs. You know, we've gone from human to machine, we've gone from products to platforms, we've gone from core to crowd. So we're very much committed about ensuring that we're giving those social skills to ensure a social norm for our children when online. And this is my final slide. A big thank you. And I just wanted to just take this opportunity to just say that there was a lot of people behind me with this book, the support, not just from family and friends, but within the school. And I just wanted to say a big thank you whilst I had the opportunity on this platform to say thank you. And thank you to Tom for obviously involving me in the project.
Thank you very much indeed, Sophie. It definitely would have been the same book without you at all. So, my thanks is to you and indeed everyone in that team. You will have, Sophie won't have noticed, but other people have noticed that your slides weren't actually moving through as you were going there, Sophie. So what we will do is share those slides with everyone on this call today afterwards. Joe's already said he'll pick that up. So we will make sure that everyone gets to see those slides along with the recording of this afterwards as well. So those thank yous can be seen. I'm now going to move on to Lee Peachey, who is the Senior Deputy Head Teacher at St Mary's Catholic High School up in Wigan. And when I met and started working with Lee, like Sophie, it was absolutely clear that he was really kind of wrestling with some of the real challenges around how an approach to digital citizenship education might be undertaken at secondary schools. It was really important in this book to look at all through, to look at primary and secondary schools together, because as I say, we're trying to provide a framework that schools themselves need to look at what it actually looks like in their settings. But with having a digital flourishing vision should go all the way through. Approaches to thinking about rules will be different in different spaces, but they're still present in both those areas. Digital character and wisdom is important, kind of across the spectrum. So it was great to have Lee involved with this book, and he's going to talk from a secondary perspective now. So over to you, Lee.
Thank you very much, Tom. So good afternoon. As Tom said, I'm Lee Peachey. I'm a Senior Deputy Head Teacher at St Mary's Catholic High School and Sixth Form College, which is in Greater Manchester. And this afternoon, I'm going to be sharing some pragmatic approaches to demonstrate how we've implemented digital citizenship. And also throughout Futureproof, we've provided lots of practical applications of digital citizenship that hopefully will spark your professional curiosity in this such vital area. The case studies are obviously from our own schools, but also from schools around the country too. So if you think carefully about the children that grace our classrooms and step through our school gates each day, it's really obvious that their behaviour, looking through conversations with them, speaking to their parents and teachers, that a large amount of their time is spent online, on mobile devices and on social media, communicating and interacting across multiple platforms. Their online interaction and activity has become an integral part of their daily operation and routine. Now, we cannot simply assume that because children have been born into the digital era, that they will automatically know how to navigate the landscape, act virtuously, and miraculously behave in a respectful and appropriate manner without us explicitly teaching them how to do so and modelling this out. And it really is a false proxy to assume that because pupils use technology a lot, that they possess the necessary skills, knowledge, and understanding to use it correctly and also sensibly. And we also can't assume that pupils will acquire this knowledge by osmosis. And we really need to think carefully about how we structure our support and guidance for children with this and how it's sequenced and built throughout the school. As Franco mentioned before, it's certainly not just a job for the computing department. It takes much more of a joined up approach to that. And hopefully Futureproof will provide you those seeds of thought of how to collectively pull that together. And as teachers, we need to try and address and break down and educate pupils about how their behaviour online and actions has an equal status and consequences, exactly how they behave and act in person too. And furthermore, we need to explain how their online activity leaves a traceable legacy which can impact on their future lives. And it really does exemplify the need for education and guidance for our young people in this vital area. So I think it's really important at this point to be clear, and picking up from what both Franco and Tom mentioned before, yes, it's really important to educate pupils about the risks that are involved with online activity to allow them to remain safe and protected. And it is absolutely right that we cover abuse, trolling, grooming, extremism, fraud, identity theft, FOMO, bullying and addiction, but also share the multitude of opportunities available to them at their disposal. Now, the very reason why I'm sat in front of you today is due to my interactions on Twitter with people like Franco, Tom and Sophie, and engaging in that professional dialogue virtually and digitally. And these opportunities are also available to pupils as well. So when educating pupils about opportunities, and as we have done within Futureproof, it may be appropriate to explore networking, employment, personal branding, marketing and growth, research, friendships, relations, communications and connections. So just to kind of provide some practical elements now, which are documented within Futureproof, which if I was a teacher, these are the sort of golden nuggets that I would want to be thinking about because they can be implemented straight into the classroom. So I truly believe to reach the utopia where pupils are demonstrating good character and making virtuous decisions online, we must get them to act like this in real person first. Making virtuous decisions and choices has to be habitual, automatic and programmed and ingrained. Then we have much more of a fighting chance with getting pupils to act in this way online, which is obviously beyond the school gates, beyond the school behaviour policy, when they're at home and where they have to default back to their own moral compass. So one of the ways that we've tried to achieve this was to implement a set of character virtues across the school that were built by our school community. We spoke to parents, staff, local community representatives, the students themselves, local partner primary heads, businesses, anybody basically that would lend an ear and have a conversation with us. And we asked them what sort of virtues they thought, if we explicitly taught to our pupils, would make our local community a better place. We had over 1,800 responses, and we use this intelligence to build our character virtues, which you can see displayed on screen. Now, from the very start, there was collective ownership of the virtues that, and as they were collectively built, and this really, really did help our implementation process. Now, We also relentlessly remind pupils about what character is, so their daily actions, which are guided by the character conversations with staff at school, plus the knowledge that they acquire through our personal development curriculum lays the foundations for their character. And over time, their actions become their habits, and over a longer period of time, their actions eventually become their character and what defines them and who they are as a person. Now, what's really important for us and what's really helped is having this common language has been extremely powerful, because when we are challenging or supporting or teaching behaviour, pupils already know this common vernacular, and very frequently we inform students that their behaviour online is exactly the same as it is in person too, and we use that common vernacular to really drive that forward. So looking at the curriculum itself and some granular examples, I think when we're looking at the delivery of citizenship and digital citizenship, we need to think carefully about the sequencing and really have an evidence-informed practice in mind. So explicitly share where the learning has come from and preview where it's going next. If we really think about altering long-term memory and the acquisition of this important knowledge into pupils' schema, long-term memory, so that they're able to draw back and apply it to situations where they face them online, I think we really need to think about giving it the curriculum time it deserves to allow it to make it stick. And it's also vital to teach pupils about digital vocabulary, as you would do in any other subject really, and that we are deliberately building and frequently building their vocabulary bank, especially as the vocabulary that is linked to digital citizenship progresses as fast as the technology as well. What we've also found useful is allowing pupils to have honest and open conversations and structured talk about real life online scenarios they face, and explore as a class which virtues could be applied. So here we see a really practical example of harassment via WhatsApp messages. This then would be opened up to the class using the structured talk prompts at the bottom of the screen. Also sharing videos where pupils are able to connect with real life scenarios has really helped our delivery, but then facilitating the class discussions, questions, and personal reflection time that follows is absolutely vital. And another strategy we've used is moral dilemmas in tutor time each week, which once again provides students with those real life situations and ask them how they would respond and explain how they would make more virtuous approaches. And the sort of benefits here is whatever issues that we are seeing becoming more prevalent within the school that relate to the online world, we can respond to through our moral dilemmas to help break them down. They become absolutely responsive to the needs that the children that we serve. And another practical example taken straight from the book, which provides structured discussion and opportunities to break down the like culture, as Sophie mentioned before, and also this idea of digital perfectionism, which impacts so much on the young people and their well-being. And to finally pick up off what Franco mentioned, yes, there are a lot of risks that are involved with students using the World Wide Web and interacting digitally, but there are also a wealth of digital opportunities as well. So the first practical example is our Flourishing Life leaders unlocking the powers of social media to promote the common good and help raise over £1,000 for cancer research, using our school's Twitter feed to promote their initiative and connect with local businesses for further support and to gain leverage. And also the interactive student-authored digital newsletter, which contains videos produced by the Flourishing Life leaders that shared their vision and initiatives, and that was used to drive civic participation and engagement across our wider school community. The digital opportunities available to pupils are endless, and we've also illustrated these in depth throughout the book too. And finally, just to provide some feedback in terms of student voice, as you can see, it would appear, and it would be a fair assumption that the information and the education around digital citizenship that we are providing is having a positive impact in the eyes of the pupils. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee, for that. Your screen is still sharing. Are you able to?
Yeah, I'm just going to stop it now.
Yeah, that's fine, just so that we can see everyone. So thanks very much indeed for that, Lee. And what you can see from the presentations from both Lee and Sophie is they've just given you some insights into what this actually looks like in the coalface. And I know many of you are teachers joining us today, and I'm sure some of their examples resonate with what you experience day in, day out, but also some of the teaching and learning approaches, both right at a very classroom level, but also a whole school level might look like, and more of those do feature in the book. So we have left about 10 minutes at the end for questions. And as I mentioned in the chat, I'm very happy for you to put a question into the chat, or indeed if anyone would like to put up their hand using the reactions tab on Zoom, then I'd be delighted to invite you in to ask your question or maybe make a comment directly. So I'll give 30 seconds or so. I see a point has been raised by Mr. Giraj around kind of 5-star rating. I'll make a brief comment on that in response, and then wait to see if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask directly. I think and I'm hoping to do more work around this, because I'm beginning to see lots of really good examples where technology itself is being used in very positive ways to support character education more broadly, not just digital character education. So how the technology might be used to enhance character education approaches. And it's possible to do this, I think, through the sorts of strategies that you're saying, Mr. Girard, so recording different approaches to behaviour, interactions, using nudge, prods, rewards, and those sorts of areas. But we've got to make sure that this isn't done too instrumentally. I think anything that brings more focus and more presence and to the area of how we might interact with each other in a more values-based way is positive. It brings awareness to that and a reminder. But if we start bringing in rewards, etc., that feel a bit more instrumental around that, then we may end up having a very short-term approach to character, not something that's actually preparing or making us think about the sorts of qualities we want to show in the future. But I think there's some promising work going on around those sorts of areas right now. Okay, I'm going to see if anyone on the panel's got a response to Naila's excellent question relating to parental engagement in digital citizenship teaching. Has anyone got any strategies, thoughts, ideas on how they might work with parents in this area?
Yeah. So I'll take the first response there. I was actually looking at the previous question as well, which I was going to kind of have a stab at too.
Please, the reason I ignored that one slightly is because Shane's my colleague and I wanted to prioritise people outside, but we will come back to Shane. But feel free to pick up both.
Yeah, as you've mentioned, parental engagement is vitally important in this particular area. So we can put a lot of emphasis into the explicit teaching of digital citizenship within school, but then when students leave the school gates, it then potentially may be unpicked. So we need to bring parents along with us on this particular journey. So some really practical examples of what we've been doing within schools and schools that we've sort of referenced within the book is building a professional development program for parents. So one practical recommendation for that is the digital citizenship that you're teaching within school. We've used our Flourish and Life Leaders, which is our student leadership group, to create their own virtual CPD for parents that we send out on a half-termly basis, which has been greatly received. And alongside that, we've put out character conversation questions as well, so families can sit at home and have those conversations with their children. That continues this learning beyond the school gate. So that has been really beneficial to us, and you're absolutely right, it's really important to bring parents along with us on this journey too.
Thank you. Sophie, what about yourself? Because I know that, I mean, not just in this area, but more broadly kind of around digital or character work as well with parents.
Yeah, I can only really echo what Lee said in terms of what we've recognised is that we as staff have been outwitted by the children, but also the parents are quite shocked at actually what their children are accessing at home. So we've very much taken the parents on the journey with us, with the children. So a lot of newsletters, a lot of after school conversations, we've done webinars for the parents, and we've kind of involved them on this kind of discovery piece that we've been on over this past 12 months, again in light of the pandemic, because it brought to the forefront so many issues for primary age children.
Great. Well, I wait for questions. I'm going to pose another question to Sophie and Lee, if that's okay. And I'm sure other people on the call will be interested to know what, if there's anything, one overarching kind of challenge or kind of issue that you think, children owning smartphones, indeed, it used to be more secondary age, but increasingly children at primary age. In fact, the statistic shows almost a majority of year sixes now have phones at least, but I know it happens much earlier. But what do you think is the major challenge that perhaps you face or your teachers face on a daily basis through smartphone use? If I could start with you, Lee.
I suppose for secondary age students, it's the amount of time that is actually spent on the devices and the attention that then draws away from education. It is an addiction, isn't it? And if it's not explicitly taught of how to use technology in a beneficial way, you can see all the stats around sort of endless scrolling. That really does have an impact. Another issue that secondary students are facing is the accessibility. So elements of criticism, elements of comparing yourself to other people is 24 hours a day, and there isn't a real break or getting away from that. So the amount of time coupled with sort of the how people can reach out to you and on social media is definitely having an impact.
Great, thanks, Lee. And Sophie?
I suppose exactly the same, but the difference is that our children are so young, and it's that disconnect from real life to online, the fact that there is no one there to kind of, it's almost seemingly boundary-free world, isn't it, for our youngsters? And when they're so young and they're only just learning how to behave, within the playground and everything else, it's a whole new world for them. And I would say that that's been the biggest issue for us. And again, the ability that our children can find ways and means within these apps that we didn't know existed as adults, whereas they're natives in the use of technology, and they're so quick at using them and finding ways round things, etc., that it's constantly, we're always on the back foot.
Excellent. Okay, and a brief final question to you, Franco, because I know you work wider in the field of media or digital literacy and also digital citizenship education. I mean, can you make a very brief case why we take a rules-based approach within this framework, but ultimately talk a lot about character? Why is a focus on character so important within kind of the broader world of kind of digital literacy?
Very important because, like I was saying earlier, like digital citizenship education is sometimes a very vague concept, and I think it is fair to say that some, it is often at the discretion of schools to kind of implement a form of education, and the truth is that in practice you would find approaches that focus more on developing competences, and that's the digital literacy element of it, which is of course very important because that has to do with how how young people use these technologies, and as I said, both functionally and critically. But then you also have a number of approaches that would focus more on, say, imposing rules, right? So this idea of Netiquette, which is which is quite prominent when it comes to digital citizenship, and it really has to do with kind of setting rules, and that is important in itself because there are situations in which there need to be rules. That the young people have in the back of their minds when using the internet. But it's also true the rules tend to be very abstract, and sometimes they transcend the specificity of the context in which young people really use these technologies, and in which they may be presented with dilemmas, with moral dilemmas, and the only way to kind of overcome, to kind of address those dilemmas and find the best, and kind of come up with a solution and take the best course of action really is to possess virtues that transcend rules, in as much as they kind of, they empower young people, they give them a sense of agency, rather than, feeling that they just need to follow certain rules without necessarily grasping why, or without necessarily taking the context into consideration. And that is precisely why we've also called the book Futureproof, right? Because, like you said at the very beginning, Tom, technologies will probably change. And this is what the world looks like today, and this is what the digital age looks like for now, but we don't really know how it's going to change in the next few decades or so. But something that will remain vital and important is the fact that people will still need to be able to show compassion and honesty and integrity and wisdom. And these are qualities that will never, they will never die. And so it is important that young people develop good character. And by good character, we mean character virtues and qualities, and ultimately wisdom. But what we did in the book was to try not to just privilege an approach to digital citizenship education over another, focusing, say, for example, just on virtues at the expenses of literacy, or just on virtues at the expenses of rules. But we really came up with a framework that puts everything together in one place in such a coherent manner.
Perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Franco, and thank you very much indeed to all of you for joining us again. As Joe's put in the chat, you can get a 30% discount off the book if you're interested, and we really hope you are interested in buying this book. I want to say a few just final thank yous. Firstly, a big thank you to Joe at the Jubilee Centre, who's helped put all of this together and managed everything today. He's done an amazing job in the background, so thank you very much. And indeed to all the staff at the Jubilee Centre and team at the Jubilee Centre who have helped support this event. Please do look at the work of the Jubilee Centre, and if you're not already signed up for the newsletter, you'll find other events like this in the future as well. So look out for the newsletter on our website. But finally, a big thank you to Franco, Sophie and Lee, and indeed the fantastic team at John Cat Publishers who've helped us get this book ready and out together. And we would be delighted to hear your feedback on it and how you might be using it in the future. So please do keep the conversation going with all of us. So have a very good evening, and as I say, please do stay in touch.